keep track of time? With a clock, you say? A grandfather clock? The numbers on the cell phone screen? Or a wristwatch, perhaps? But how do you feel time? Why not portion the day into how often you feel hungry? Or portion it into as many things as you need to do that day. Let some days have 3 units of time in them, some just 1 big unit of time, a day of continuity. How about the time of a lifetime? Life comes in epochs. There's the childhood, the teenagehood, the adulthood, and alas, the most wisest epoch of all, the grandparenthood. Each epoch stretches just as long as it need be, and just as short as it must. Each epoch brings about its own wisdom. What about the lifetime of the earth? The earth was not born as it stands before us today. It has passed through many an epoch, whose signs appear as different colors in layers and layers of rock. The deeper you dig through, an older portrait of the earth you find. And what about the universe? Do you think the universe itself is oblivious to time? Do you think it just bared through all the ages of humanity imprinted in ornaments and tools that decorate museum shelves today? All the ages of the earth imprinted in the rocks, just as it was today? No, not at all. The universe also feels time. It feels how time passes, and it defines what time is for us. This is what I work on. I work to understand how the universe itself recognizes time. The universe has a history, just like the earth does, just like each one of us does. It is imprinted in the sky as waves. As waves of light and waves of anything else as light. Like the gravitational waves and the neutrinos. Like remembering old memories, some through the image of photographs, others through the voices ringing in one's ears. The universe has lived through many an epoch, just like the rest of us. Some epochs well known, others still hiding in the dark. The epoch of inflation for its growthhood, during which the universe just grew, and as it grew, it incorporated little fluctuations, small deviations of how hot it was here and there. These fluctuations are seen today. Even you see them when you open an old-fashioned TV and switch on a channel that has not been tuned into a station. The epoch of radiation, for its energetic years, when the lightest of elements began to form and run around mad, never staying still to have a chat with one another. The epoch of matter domination, for its craftyhood, when things quietened down a little, although still growing, yet at a slower pace. Back then, the still young universe began to form galaxies from the small deviations of warmth. In those days, the stars were knighted as the factories of carbon, iron, and what more. And at last today, the epoch of dark energy domination, in which the universe is going through a growth spring again. All this variety, just because the way the universe keeps up with time. In all this time, the universe kept growing. The clock for the universe is how its growth rate changes. The universe grows by expanding in all directions. How fast it expands is different at each epoch. This clock for the universe comes with a name. It is called the Hubble's parameter, named after he who watched how fast the brightest stars run away from each other. At every epoch, the Hubble's parameter changes. But how does one come to know all this? Cosmology studies this history. It works, as one of today's famous physicists says, as the archaeology of the universe. This knowledge is gathered around by gluing together little glimpses of the past in patches. Some handle the glue of observations. Others, such as me, handle the glue of principles that can be cast by pen on paper. I study an ideal version of the universe that looks like the way our universe was in the very beginning and today. This is called the de Sitter spacetime. The principles that guide my studies are called symmetries, different ways in which you can write down something, yet still say the same thing. These different ways are not the same for every epoch of the universe. Not for every other geometry you can think of. And now, how do you capture a universe on pen and paper, you say? You handle the universe by considering it as a geometry. There exist flat geometries, like the surface of a respectable dinner table. And there exist curved ones, like a wrinkly, twisted t-shirt coming out of the washer. The universe is expanding because it is curved. And it is curved differently at each epoch of its lifetime because it bears through different kinds of matter at each one of them. So, how do you put all this by pen and paper? You do so by keeping track of how to measure distance. This is the Pythagoras' theorem we are all taught at school. This is for flat geometries with only 2 dimensions. You keep an eye on how to write down the distance on very nearby points. The distance between 2 nearby points for the universe also looks like this among space. Only it has 3 things, for we live in 3 dimensions of space. And then there is also time. who enters in with a different signature to distinguish itself from the rest. And as we said all this time, there is the fact that the spatial parts among the spacetime we call our universe are expanding in time. Our dear friend, the Hubble's parameter, keeps track of how fast this A of t changes with time. In the case of a de Sitter universe, the Hubble's parameter is fixed. The de Sitter universe keeps growing the same amount forever. This leads to special ways in which you can redefine how you call time and how you call space without anyone noticing the difference from how they call time and how they call space. This word play, as we said, is called a symmetry. Every spacetime has symmetries like this, just a little bit different depending on the spacetime. De Sitter has different symmetries than those present during radiation domination, for instance. Now I said de Sitter is an ideal version of the universe early on and the universe of today. In de Sitter, it wouldn't be any different how hot it is here or there. In de Sitter, there would be no end to the growth hood, no passage into the energetic years of radiation domination. But an ideal case is where the path begins. An ideal case that still captures the essence. Such an ideal case grants one an overall understanding of the situation. After that, the quest becomes how to deform this ideal case into something more realistic. To understand the universe, we also need to understand how we perceive it. Developing methods to study ideal setups teaches us about how we think in the first place. We actually learn about the universe by discovering the limits of our thinking. This archaeology that we call cosmology, I study the symmetries of de Sitter and how they would shape the matter that lives in it to understand how we understand the universe at its youth and at its old age.